So you've just gone ahead and bought the ZV-E1 from Sony, a beginner-friendly full-frame camera that does it all. And you're wondering, hey, what do I need to do to get this up and running as quickly as possible? Well, fear not. In this video, I'll get you up and running in under 5 minutes. And the first thing you need to do is get it out of the intelligent auto mode. So this camera, as soon as you get it out of the box, is going to be in an intelligent automatic mode, which means it's a point and shoot camera. And we want to get it out of that, right? We want to get it into the manual mode. And what I'm assuming here is that you know how to do basic videography using the manual setup of most cameras. And if you don't, it's not really a secret. It's as simple as keeping your shutter speed double of what your frame rate is. So if your frame rate is 24, keep the shutter speed to 48 or 50. 60 means 120, and 120 frames per second means 240 shutter speed is ideal. And the reason for that is that you get this blurry effect. And I have a saying for this: double the shutter speed to get the blurry feed. I think that rhymes. What do you think? I made that up in the morning. Now that you've got the camera out of the intelligent auto mode, the next thing and the most important thing is, this being a video camera, you want to try and shoot in 24, 60 and 120. And how quickly can I switch between 24 to 120 to 60 to whatever it is that you want to do? Well, I have a simple trick for this. This is what I use personally. And what I do is I use the memory recall setting on this camera. Now, unlike the A7 IV, which has 1, 2 and 3 recalls on the dial, that isn't the case on the Sony ZV-E1, but it still is possible to do this within 2 clicks. And so the way I've done it on the Sony is just by having 1 as 24, 2 as 60, and 3 as 120 on full HD. Well, I've followed a similar suit on the ZV-E1. I've got memory recall 1 set as 24 frames per second, memory recall 2 as 60, and memory recall 3 as 120 frames per second in 4K. And it's a 2-button click to go from one to the other. Simple. Okay, let me show this to you quickly because I don't think I made much sense in that last bit. Right, let's do it. Okay, so I've got the ZV-E1 right here. And what I'm trying to say is that if I click my function button and I go to my shooting modes, and in my memory recall, I've got the first recall set to 1/50th for 24 frames per second. The second one set to 1/250th for 120 frames per second. And the third one at 1/125 for 60 frames per second. So for example, if I'm shooting one of those particular frame rates and I want to change it, it's as simple as clicking the function button, going in here, changing it to, let's say, super slow-mo 120, and all of my settings are there, ready for me to go. As simple as that. Now, one of you must be thinking, hey, this camera also does 240 frames per second in full HD, and I've got you covered, right? This camera has an S&Q mode as well, so you could switch from the movie mode onto the S&Q mode, and in the S&Q mode, I've done the same thing, gotten it out of the intelligent auto mode into a manual mode, and my manual settings are 240 frames per second, full HD. And so, if I was shooting in 24 and I want to do real super slow-mo, it's 1 click away. Switch from movie to S&Q, Bob's your uncle. Now, I'm a pretty lazy guy in general, but more so, even more so, when it comes to autofocusing on cameras. I tend to let the camera do its thing. Of course, I set it up how I prefer to, but at the end of the day, I just let it do its thing, and it works pretty well majority of the time for me. Well, that's the reason I'm in the Sony ecosystem anyway, because the autofocusing on Sony cameras are pretty good. Some would say very good or excellent even, and I would agree with all of them. So yes, in this case, autofocusing is left to the camera. But there are times when I need to take back control, like Brexit. I'm talking about the autofocusing here. Yes, I need to take back control and do some manual work on it. And for that, I have a toggle that turns the autofocusing to manual focusing. It's a custom switch that I've set up, and I press that and it turns to manual focusing and I have my control back. But yes, it helps me under certain situations, and that is why I've set that button up, to give me a little bit of control. But 99.9% of the times I just let it do its thing, and it does work pretty well most of the times. Now remember when I said that this camera lacks buttons? Yes, I know that, you know that. Before you bought this camera, you knew that it had less buttons than a lot of the other prosumer level cameras. But this camera has something that a lot of the other cameras don't, and that is settings on the touchscreen. Now you might be like, ugh, that sounds a bit weird, and so was I. But a couple of minutes later, I was like, stop being stupid and use them, right? So it gives you 10 setting options on either end, 5 on each end, to customize to your liking and give you another at-a-glance look at what the settings are. And that's how I use it. I use it as, like you would on an iPhone, you know, when you have your notifications at a glance. The same way I use the settings right now on the recorder right now. I can see that, oh, yeah, the mic is at the front. It's got face autofocus. It's at 120 and it's out of the intelligent auto mode. Fantastic. So at a glance, it gives me a lot of information and data that I can take on, and I know that the camera is in the right settings and it's doing the thing that I want it to do. So don't shy away from using that touchscreen and the ability that it gives you. The final thing, which maybe should have been the first thing that you should have done if you're watching this video in Europe, is change it from PAL to NTSC. Now, this is a controversial one, but basically, if your camera is in PAL, you're going to see 25 frames per second, 50 frames per second, and 100 frames per second. Whereas if you're in NTSC, you're going to see 24 frames per second, 60 frames per second, and 120 frames per second. But one of the reasons why it's set in PAL, because you're in the European region, is because of the lights and the way they flicker and the frequency that they flicker at. Quite frankly, for me, it is not a problem because I'm either shooting outside, where the sun is not giving out light at a certain frequency, or I'm shooting indoors and majority of my house has LED lights, so they don't really flicker, or my cob light here is not going to flicker, so it doesn't matter what frame rate I set it to. But what it does give me is that 24 frames per second, which is, according to a lot of people, the best frame rate to shoot videos at. Now, all you haters out there, I'm not shooting production level TV quality stuff on this, and neither are you if you have a ZV-E1. So yeah, it's up to you whether you want to change it from PAL to NTSC. I did, for personal reasons, like I said, gives me 24 and 50 and 120. A lot of other camera brands don't give you that option. They just have 24, 25, 30, 50, 60, 100, 120. Sony doesn't. So I've changed it, and you can too. And there you have it. I've given you 5 fantastic tips which is going to get you up and running on your camera in no time. If you liked it, then leave a comment down below. Maybe I can give you my settings as a file and you can try it out on your Sony ZV-E1. Maybe you'll like it. So, if you do, give it a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.